Hi, and welcome. You're listening to Historic Huguenot Street's weekly show on WFNP The Edge, where we discuss New Paltz history and the history of the Hudson Valley. This is, of course, our first show of the new semester, so welcome back, students. I'm Kaitlin Gallucci, and I'm the Communications Manager at Historic Huguenot Street. Since this is our first show in a few months, and for those who may be tuning in for the first time, tonight's show will provide a bit of a recap on what Historic Huguenot Street is, what it does, and why it's important. Historic Huguenot Street is a nonprofit, 10-acre National Historic Landmark District dedicated to preserving historic buildings, artifacts, and manuscripts, and promoting the stories of the Huguenot Street families who founded New Paltz. For those who don't know, New Paltz was founded in 1677 by a group of French Huguenot families who were fleeing religious persecution as Protestants in their native France during the French Wars of Religion. When they first left France, they first settled in a Protestant region of Germany called Die Pfalz, before ultimately coming to North America and what was at the time the Dutch colony of New Netherland. The Dutch were well known for their religious tolerance, and the Huguenot families initially settled in the town of Wiltwyck, which today is Kingston. Ultimately, they wanted a community of their own. So they arranged the purchase of 30,000 acres of land from the local Esopus Indian tribes and received a land patent confirming it in 1677 from the new English governor of New York, Sir Edmund Andros. Of course, reminiscent of their time in the German region of Die Pfalz, they named their community New Paltz. Huguenot Street in New Paltz is the site of the original settlement. And if you've ever wondered why, those of you who are students, why your dorms are called things like Lefevre and Bevier, this is why. Those are the family names of the original New Paltz founders. In the spring, our site's regular guided tours were updated to include more information about that early settlement and what the site may have looked like when the Huguenots first arrived in 1677. So tonight, I'm joined by Huguenot Street's Director of Public Programming, Kara Gaffken, who can tell us a bit more about that. Hi, Kara.
Hi, Kaitlin. Thanks for having me back.
Thank you for being here. So can you tell us a bit about the interpretation of early New Paltz that's being presented in the new tours?
Of course. So when we firmly decided that we needed to make changes to our daily tours that were being launched this year, we were lucky enough to have the help of Bill Weldon at our fingertips. And for those of you who don't know, Bill Weldon, who was formerly on our board of trustees, he ended up becoming a consultant for Huguenot Street. He was pretty much the creative mind behind the revolutionary city at Colonial Williamsburg, and he consulted with us for about a year and helped us to transform and evolve our tours in many ways. This year, our tours have been running May through October, 6 days a week. The only day of the week that we're closed is on Wednesdays. And they go out every hour on the hour, starting at 10 a.m. when our visitor center opens up. And then the last tour of the day goes out at 4 p.m. Now, these tours last about an hour and a half. And what's extra special about the tours this year is that visitors now get to see not just one building or not just two buildings, but 4 buildings on this hour and a half tour. So those buildings include the Bevere Elting House, the 1717 reconstructed French church, the Jean Hasbrook House, and the Deo House. And through seeing these homes, our visitors actually travel through hundreds, even thousands of years of history. Not only that, but we've strived to strengthen our focus on the history of underrepresented individuals, such as the Native Americans and the enslaved Africans on the street. So, like you were saying, something that's additionally new this year is, what did Huguenot Street look like when our European founders got here? And so the first home that visitors get to go into, the Bevere Elting House, one of the first things that people see are these illustrated screens that hang in the windows of that home. So you enter this house, and when you're looking out the windows of the home, you're actually looking at an illustration of what would have been there on that landscape thousands of years prior to European contact. So what you're looking at is the Native American landscape, and you're seeing a wigwam, and you're seeing the what we know as the Schwangum Ridge now, and some farming techniques. You're seeing the Three Sisters, the maize bean squash, and that gives us it's the tool that we use to say the Huguenots weren't the first people to live here. They weren't the first people to inhabit this land, and they weren't the first people to shape it. There were very significant cultures and communities here before them. So that's really exciting, is that we get to go back even further than Huguenot history and talk about the Lenape and the Native Americans who were here. And then another thing that is really significant to this year's tours, like I said, is the further incorporation of the interpretation of the history of slavery on the street. So this is something that has more or less been sprinkled into our tours throughout the year, but this year is a very significant focus. So also in the Beaver Elding House, again, one of the first things that our visitors do is they get to step into the cellar of that home. And this is where the enslaved would have lived, would have worked, would have been kept, essentially. And they get to feel that environment and see the type of space that these people would have really had to endure. So being able to shed light on some of these underrepresented individuals throughout history is really important to us, and we're really proud of the work that we've done in terms of that. So I think what's most significant is our tours have not only changed this year, they actually change every year. So even if you went on a tour a year ago, definitely come back again, and come back every year, because we're always adapting and evolving.
Right. All right, great. So again, just as a reminder, those tours are offered hourly, every hour on the hour, 6 days a week, every day except Wednesdays. And the tours begin at 10 a.m. and the last tour of the day goes out at 4 p.m. And while I would, of course, recommend that full tour, which brings you into 3 historic houses and the reconstructed church, I do want to mention that we recently launched a walking tour mobile app for those of you who maybe don't have time for a full tour, or if it's a Wednesday when we're closed. So the app, which we launched this summer, is available for both Apple and Android devices, and it gives you a brief history of each of the historic houses on the street, plus some archival photos and some photos of the interiors and the collections pieces inside, things like that. So if you've never taken a tour, I do recommend it, but you can also get your feet wet first with our new mobile app. And you can find that just by searching for Historic Huguenot Street in your device's app store. And most importantly, SUNY New Paltz students, don't forget that you get free guided tours with your student ID every day.
Free,
exactly.
Come visit us.
Well, we haven't been on the radio since May, but we had a great summer on the street.
We did.
As we mentioned in the spring, this year we had the SUNY New Paltz Archaeology Field School on site. We had Camp Huguenot, our 2nd annual cider market, our 4th annual Artists on the Street event. If you missed any of these events that we had this summer, we created a number of videos from them, which are available on our Facebook page and on our YouTube channel. And our great intern, Victoria O'Connor, also created a podcast for us this summer, which you can find on SoundCloud, which will also give you some recaps of some of the great events we had. It's been a very busy summer. We also recently launched a new series of programs called the Old Fort History Club. Now, this predates probably all of the students here, but a lot of longtime New Paltz locals recall that the Dubois Fort on Huguenot Street, which is now our visitor center, used to be a restaurant called the Old Fort. And that restaurant opened in the 30s, and it closed in 1990. We always hear from people about their memories and experiences at the Old Fort restaurant, so we decided to launch a monthly program for Old Fort History Club members to give folks the opportunity to enjoy food and drink at the Old Fort just like people used to do. Our events this summer, as part of the Old Fort History Club, featured a cider tasting with Brooklyn Cider House. Their apples come from Twin Star Orchard right here in New Paltz. A beer tasting with the New Paltz Brewing Company. We had music. We got to see some of the artifacts that Professor Joe Diamond's field school had discovered. It's really a good time. So if you go to huguenotstreet.org, that's huguenotstreet.org, you can become a member of the club for $25, and that'll give you access to all those future events. Coming up later this month, we have another Old Fort History Club event. It'll be a food and cider pairing with Angry Orchard Cider. It'll also include a chat about some of the cookbooks that are found in the Huguenot Street archives, which is a perfect topic for the Old Fort. And that'll be presented by food historian Peter G. Rose, who is also a member of the Huguenot Street Board. Registration for that event should open up soon this month, but you can still sign up to be a member of the club at any time by going to our website. So that's all the things, we did so much this summer, but fall is also a great season in New Paltz in general, but that includes also at Historic Huguenot Street. Of course, October is when we host our annual Haunted Huguenot Street tours, which sell out every year. We also have our holiday programming coming up after that, but we do also have something really special this year, something we haven't done before, and it kind of goes kind of hand in hand with a little bit of what Kara was saying before. So actually just next weekend, we'll be hosting, along with SUNY New Paltz, an overnight visit by a man named Joseph Miguel, who is the founder of the Slave Dwelling Project. He travels the country, spending the night in historic slave dwellings to bring awareness to their existence, history, and need for preservation. Next Friday, he and his colleague Terry James will be spending the night in 2 cellar kitchens identified as former slave dwellings on Huguenot Street. Joseph has been doing this since 2010, but this will be just his second overnight in a New York State slave dwelling following his visit to Long Island last year. And this will also be his first visit to the Hudson Valley. And this is particularly significant because, contrary to the popular belief that slavery was practiced almost exclusively in the South, northern states were also dependent on enslaved African labor. And slavery was not legally abolished in New York State until 1827. We have documentation, again, like Kara said, we're talking about this in our tours this year. We have documentation proving that early New Paltz settlers were slave owners. And, granted, slavery in the North did differ from slavery in the South, which is something we cover in more detail on our tours, exactly what that experience was like. But it's of course, important to acknowledge that this did exist. So, Kara, can you tell us a bit more about what is planned for Joseph McGill's visit next weekend?
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you sort of made the connection to the changes in the tour because, highlighting and honoring these, like I said, underrepresented individuals isn't just done in the new tours and interpretations. We're doing it through public programming and special events as well.
Yeah, and similarly, like, it's not something we'll do, once a season or once a year. It's literally something we do every day.
Right, absolutely. So, as you said, Joseph Miguel is the founder of the Slave Dwelling Project, and his colleague who will be joining him, Terry James, that's a close friend of Joseph, and he has spent nights in over 40 slave dwellings, actually in shackles to commemorate those who endured the Middle Passage. So these men will be here in New Paltz the weekend of September 9th to the 11th, and they've got a lot on their plate. They have a really, really busy schedule.
Yeah.
So they'll both be attending and partaking in relevant class discussions at SUNY New Paltz on Friday, specifically, I believe, in the Black Studies department. So many students will be able to actually have some sort of one-on-one discussion with them, even if they're not going to be attending the overnight stay.
Right.
So they'll be able to benefit, from Joseph and Terry's visit here to New Paltz. And then that evening, that Friday, The two of them will be staying the night at Huguenot Street, along with a number of descendants of those who had been enslaved on Huguenot Street, as well as select students from SUNY New Paltz. So this is not a large group. It's just a very small group of people. And I believe these students are going to be hand-selected from the professors from the Black Studies Department. So that's definitely going to be something really meaningful to them. You know, if your professor picks you to be a part of this experience, I think that's going to be such an honor. So after the overnight on Saturday evening, the participants will all be invited to return to Huguenot Street to share their experience with members of the general public at a 5 p.m. reception at the Du Bois Fort, followed by a 6:30 talk presented by Joseph Miguel. Miguel will talk again on Sunday at SUNY New Paltz, and that'll be free and open to the public. So stay tuned for more information on that as well.
Great. That should be, I mean, I'm really looking forward to that. That should be an amazing experience. I'm so glad that we have the opportunity to be a part of that.
Yeah, I think it's something so unique and so special because, like you said, this is only going to be his second visit to New York State ever, and his first visit to the Hudson Valley. So that again means something to us, and I think it's going to be really impactful for not only people in the New Paltz community, but really should be impactful to people all over New York, New England, and the North in general, because you still have this you have these ideas floating around that slavery didn't exist in the North.
Exactly.
And that's just really not the case. And that's something that Huguenot Street has felt really strongly about, that we need to get that point across that, you know, like you said, it was different than Southern slavery, but it did exist here. It was still completely inhumane and completely horrible. And we shouldn't be, you know, sweeping those stories and the history of those people and the experiences that they had under the rug. We should be talking about them and honoring those individuals by talking about them. So that's something that I think Joseph has done with the Slave Dwelling Project, and we're lucky enough to have him be helping us continue to tell these stories by visiting Huguenot Street.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, because it's amazing just to think that it's like he's been doing the Slave Dwelling Project for 6 years, and this is his second visit to New York. And I think I read that honestly, he's had probably less than you can count on one hand his number of visits to like northern states in general, not just New York. So you know, it really is such a misconception that, you know, or people, I think people like to believe that it didn't happen here, but it did, and it's important, and it's good that we're gonna have the opportunity to, you know, teach people about that.
Yeah, people like to pretend it didn't happen in the South too.
Yeah, that's true. But
it did, right?
It did, exactly.
And those stories need to be told.
Absolutely. That's right. What he's doing is really so amazing. So folks can register for our September 10th reception with Joseph from the Slave Dwelling Project. So that'll be the reception he'll be giving the day after he does his overnight at huguenotstreet.org/McGill reception. That's MCGILL reception. And just to note, visitors, you know, I think we mentioned this before, but visitors do visit one of these historic slave dwellings that Joseph and his colleague Terry will be staying in on our regular guided tours 6 days a week. So say, you know, you're not one of the folks that is able to do an overnight, but I mean, you still have the opportunity to visit this former slave dwelling on our regular tours 6 days a week. And then you'll learn more about the enslaved experience in this region. And I just want to note, for those with limited mobility, the stairs to the cellar are very, very steep, but we've just developed an accessible version of the tour. So tour guides are prepared to interpret the cellar using photos and documents if anyone is unable to do the traditional tour. Right now, we're going to take a quick break. This is WFNP The Edge. Hi, and welcome back. You're listening to Historic Huguenot Street's weekly program on WFNP, The Edge. I'm Kaitlin Gallucci, and I'm joined by Huguenot Street's Director of Public Programming, Gaffken. So we just, spent a bit of time talking about one of our very close coming up next weekend events with the Slave Dwelling Project. But Kara, can you tell us a bit more about what other programs are coming up this season?
Definitely. So the fall and holiday seasons are always incredibly exciting on Huguenot Street. And it's probably when we see the most visitors because we just have the most fantastic programs. And people are coming up from the city. You have the leaf peepers, so we see lots of tourists during this time too.
Definitely.
But specifically reach out to New Paltz residents through community events as well. So we will have more Old Fort History Club events in October and September. We sort of already covered the September one, of course.
Right.
But the one in October, that event will take place on October 8th. It's a Saturday. And it will take place, of course, at the Old Fort from 5 to 7. So we'll be having a burial ground tour that evening, which is just so perfect for the season, gearing up for Halloween, of course. And that will be with author and Gardner historian A.J. Shankman, who will also be signing copies of his books, Wicked Ulster County and Murder and Mayhem in Ulster County. And we'll have those books available for purchase, of course. And what you've all been waiting for, our Haunted Huguenot Street tours will be back, and they will be taking place the last 3 Fridays and Saturday evenings in October. So these tours are super popular and sell out incredibly fast, like you were saying again earlier. So please look out for our pre-event registration. We'll be doing blast when that's open, via email, social media. So be on the lookout if you are interested in attending a Haunted Huguenot Street tour this year.
Yeah, that registration, that'll probably open by the end of this month, I would assume.
Yep,
Yeah.
I was just going to say that. So not only that, but we'll be bringing back Trick or Treat on Huguenot Street again this year.
Good.
I think it's the 3rd year.
It is,
Oh
yeah.
my gosh, we'll be doing it. Last year we had hundreds of trick-or-treaters on Huguenot Street, and it's just such a fun community event. We put flyers in all the kids' backpacks at both Lenape and Duzine, so parents be on the lookout for that. Halloween is actually a Monday this evening, and Huguenot Street provides a really fantastic, safe environment for your kids to come trick-or-treat. We do a road closure so they can sort of run around freely, and our trick-or-treating event is specifically from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock, so you can take them to the parade immediately afterwards and then get them in bed because it's a school night. So fast forward to December, because that's how we work on Huguenot Street. We like to plan ahead, and I'm always thinking about the holidays. I've been singing holiday tunes for about a month now. So Huguenot Street will be partnering with the Reformed Church of New Paltz for the 3rd annual community tree lighting at a holiday on Huguenot Street, and that will be the weekend of Friday, December 2nd through Saturday, December 3rd. There's going to be a craft fair, a performance from the Big Blue Big Band, horse-drawn carriage rides, and more. So please put that on your calendars as well, because again, it's such a fun community event, and so many people come out, and it's so nice to see New Paltz sort of supporting Huguenot Street, and everyone just sort of supporting each other, because we always get a lot of business sponsorships and partnerships for these events as well.
Right.
So on top of that, we of course thank all of our sponsors who've been helping us throughout the year. We would not be able to do it with all of our friends out in the community.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. Last year was the first time for the holiday that we had the horse-drawn carriage and the concert and stuff, and it was so much fun.
It
was. The carriage rides, I knew it would be cool, but it was seriously so charming. Like, they have sleigh bells on them and they're jingling down the street, and it was so sweet. It really, I'm so happy to hear that we're doing that again.
It's a lot of fun, and we are actually making the carriage path just a little bit longer this year.
Ooh, yay!
So, I know. So you'll get to enjoy the rides and the caroling, just a few minutes extra, and get to go down Huguenot Street a little bit further. So that's of course a lot of fun. And of course we'll be doing holiday tours that weekend. So specifically, you'll be able to go into the Jean Hasbrook House and the Deo House and really compare and contrast how the early Huguenot settlers would have, or should I say, would not have celebrated the holidays, and then contrast that to the Deo House time period and just the Victorians who were completely over the top with everything. I always say, they were the people who decorated the decorations, right?
Right.
And they threw all the parties, and they were the gift givers and the carolers and all those sort of traditions that we associate with our holidays today. This is the time period that it came from. So it's a really cool tour. We're bringing it back this year, along with the carriage rides, of course. We're also bringing back the miniature donkey petting zoo, so that'll be awesome. I know.
So
they had
sweet.
little Santa hats
Oh my
on
gosh,
last
they
year.
did.
I know, they were fantastic. And then something new that we'll be doing this year is we'll actually be selling paper lanterns this year, little handheld 8-inch paper lanterns. You'll be able to purchase them either through Historic Huguenot Street or the Reformed Church at New Paltz. And after Soup on a Stoop, which is another event that happens at the Reformed Church that evening, we will be having a light parade with those paper lanterns. So we'll be walking from the Reformed Church on Huguenot Street down to the Deo House for the community tree lighting. So that'll just
be beautiful.
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
And that'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So look out for sales for that as well.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, the tree lighting is one of those things that it's like, you really see like all of New Paltz turn out for it. I feel like Haunted, trick-or-treating, and that tree lighting, they're really, it's just packed, and it's really nice to just see everyone that you kind of, you see them in the bakery, you see them at the bank, and now we're at the tree lighting.
Exactly. And
having a light parade.
Yep. And I think that's what makes those events my favorite on the street, is because they are so community centered, and it's basically like you're attending something with all of your closest friends. And I think it just has such a nice sort of environment and feeling to them that everyone knows everyone, and they're on Huguenot Street enjoying themselves, and that means so much to us.
Yeah, definitely. Very grateful that all those folks come out. Well, thank you, Kara. So we're wrapping up now, but listeners can tune in every Thursday going forward from at 7:30 p.m. for the rest of the semester at WFNP.org or 88.7 FM to hear more from Historic Huguenot Street. And check out HuguenotStreet.org for information on all these upcoming events we've been talking about. You can also follow us on social media and sign up for our email list to stay informed on what's happening on the street. Thanks for listening.